Hello, I'm BR Converses, and today I'm going to be talking all about the cost of living crisis and how it relates to a concept known as economic scarring. Let's get straight into it as always. So, this time I'm beginning with a bit of information before we see a video. What is economic scarring? When economies go into decline, for example in the pandemic, the time it takes to recuperate the economy back to its previous health is the length of economic scarring. So it's the period between previous health until returning to health. The UK economy is still scarred from the pandemic, and now the proxy war with Russia is likely to drive costs even higher.
Inflation is now its highest since 1982, hitting 9.1%, and driving that rise, the essentials. Food went up by 8.7% over the year to May. Road fuel prices are 32.8% higher than just 12 months ago. High costs which economists say haven't even peaked yet, and pain which isn't been spread evenly.
These are absolutely shocking figures. It has been clearly demonstrated, though, over the years that economic scarring can exist for a shorter period of time or even be remedied rather quickly when a government moves to encourage or even incentivize strong investment in infrastructure. And this has been politically penned in the UK as the Build Back Better campaign.
The Bank of England expects that inflation will exceed 11% in October. But the poorest households are already experiencing double-digit inflation according to the Resolution Foundation. They spend more of their incomes on the essentials, so an increase in food and fuel will have a much bigger impact. So the wealthiest households right now are experiencing inflation of just over 8.5%. The poorest are experiencing inflation of just under 10.5%.
With the best will in the world and the best investments in the world, it's likely that this economic scarring is going to last around a decade, although for some of that decade we're going to be moving in the right direction. What examples of infrastructure apply here? Well, you've got to think of the transport sector, for example, train networks, networks of communication, sewage, water sector, education and work. Networks of communication even include phone lines.
I'm very concerned about this winter, because I know that all the electricity bills are going to go up even more and people are not going to be able to cope.
We used to have treats, but we've cut them out, we've cut biscuits out, you name it, we've tried to cut it all out.
Now, with inflation comes vicious cycles. One of those is the fact that inflation leads people to call for pay rises, which they need to pay for their bills, which further drives the instability. This scarring brunt has to be placed on the shoulders of someone. But often the poorest are landed with the greatest consequences of devastation.
The price cap, which sets a limit on how much energy companies can charge the average customer for gas and electricity, last winter was £1,277. Following a spike in wholesale oil and gas costs, this rose to £1,971 in April, an increase of 54%. Those on the prepayment meters, though, pay even more. And in October, bills are expected to rise again by over £800, with the price cap rising to around £2,800.
For the purposes of backing up my point and showing why it relates to this particular crisis coming from the pandemic, there was actually a pandemic brief by the ITF OECD.org. They stated there very clearly that infrastructure investment is a tried and tested way to successfully stimulate economic activity, including growth, post-crisis. Projects that can deliver jobs and growth in the short and medium term, so ideally as quickly as possible, must be prioritised. This is, for example, projects that have already been in the pipeline with their planning permission in place, or even environmental permission if they're building, for example, on a greenfield site. Governments should consider the length of returns on their investment, how long it is before the investments are going to be viable and giving returns. And stimulus packages should focus on decarbonisation and reduced inequality.
Jade is a debt advisor, and she's seeing up close the impact that the cost of living crisis is having.
Do you think that we're going to see a rise in evictions primarily because people are struggling with their utility bills
Yeah.
and struggling to pay their rent.
Yeah, it's making that decision. What do I pay? Do I pay the rent? Do I pay for food, or do I put the heating on? What do I do? The income that they get just doesn't cover everything.
Although largely when the government gives a lump sum of money to someone in order to help them cope with the cost of living crisis, it's usually not specifically just because they'd like you to eat. There's a bit more to do with it. It's likely that they hope you'll spend all of it and then stimulate the economy into growth. I cannot speculate on every case, of course, but this is often the case. Perhaps sometimes is a better word to use. Meanwhile, during times of decline such as this, mental health issues increase in the population, which regularly leads to the boom of the alcohol, pub and cigarette industries, so do watch out. Thank you so much for watching this video, and as always, the more depthy and interesting your comments, the more others can gain from them. I welcome all input. Have a wonderful day.